Good afternoon from London. We're just going to wait a few moments while people join. I think we've got a couple more people coming on right now. In the meantime, we'll do a few introductions and then we'll get going with the main event. So my name is Anthony Harling from Harlschon Consulting. I've had a background in executive search for about 30 years or so, working with some big firms and some smaller firms. And my work today is really focused mainly around career transition. And I'm joined today by Jodi Kaelle from Monterosa and James Brockett from Calibre One. Jodi, you specialize in hiring CEOs for companies that are going through some kind of transition. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice to see you all. So I'm Jodi Kaelle. I work with Monterosa. I'm one of the co-founders here. We founded it about 18 years ago. And we are indeed focused on global companies going through major transformations. We always work at the board and C-level. Um, there's no more transformation than the time now, right? So we are busy. We are really, it's always global. We've got our team across kind of Europe and the US, and it's been a terrifically busy time for us, which has been fun.
Cool. James, you and I've known each other for many years, and you do a lot of work, I think, also with C-level and boards and including some non-executive hires. Can you tell us a bit about your practice and Calibre One?
Yeah, so we've been around for 25 years, founded in London, opened in the US about 22 years ago. So fairly quickly we moved over there. Today we've got about 70 people, just shy of 70 people, primary locations, London, New York, and San Francisco. 80% of our work is private equity backed. We do chair and board, CEO and C-suite execs, and the work that we do client-wise and to an extent function-wise has quite a consistent technology theme to it. So a lot of work with CTOs, CPOs, a lot of work in AI at the moment, and also in with CEOs and chairman hires where they're looking to drive value for the private equity investors.
Okay, thanks very much, James. And I've had apologies from Annabelle Edo, who should have, from Ackman, Annabelle should have been joining us today, but she's been called away at very short notice on a very, very urgent matter. So apologies from Annabelle. She can't join us today. So you've got the three of us, but I'm hoping that we'll have a very interesting and stimulating discussion. Just one bit of admin. We want to make this an interactive session. So I'm sure you'll have your questions. Please ask your questions as we go along. If you use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to type in your questions, then we will attempt to address those questions immediately. But failing that, what we're going to do is we're going to have our discussion for about 45 minutes, and that will allow us 15 minutes or so at the end to handle any other Q&A. So please use the chat function. Please feel free, ask any questions you like. Cool. Jodi, can I kick off with you? Just wanted to ask you a question about this new era of business development, because I get the impression that, nowadays it's not just about winning the mandate, and that actually business development is a bit more sophisticated than it is today, and perhaps we shouldn't be surprised about that. What is your perception from Monterosa?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. I would say probably winning the mandate today has changed a bit to winning it pre-mandate. So there's a lot of work that goes into a pitch that even prior to showing up, right? Because we can all get intelligent now. We can all, think through kind of the market shifts and competitor hiring patterns and things that, it's less about process of search and it's more about the intelligence that you bring.
Okay, so it's an emphasis on the intelligence that's surrounding the whole mandate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Teams and clients are hiring you for your judgment, for who you know in the market, how quickly you can get to the market, as opposed to kind of that process that, kind of slow to long list, short list.
Yeah, yeah. James, what about in the work that you're doing at Calibre One? How have you noticed a change?
Um, well, I think it's all been sort of. I think the change to this point has been relatively slow. I mean, everybody is using obviously LLMs to prepare for meetings. Everybody is using AI to produce reports that previously used to take ages. And as far as its impact though on business development, I think Jodi's right. I think it's a lot of the work that one does to win a search happens pre-pitch. So it's how informed you can be on the market, the company, the competitors. And I get the sense that AI has just sort of, leveled the playing field a little bit. And because it's leveled the playing field a little bit, to stand out from the crowd, you've got to go a little bit further. It's sort of so it's going to become, I think, down to how good you are at constructing the prompts to get what you need that are going to create that point of difference out of AI, really. So it's a little feels like a bit of an arms race, but we're still in very early days, and I do think that people still choose search firms for the same reasons they ever did, which is the person that's in the room with them is filling them with confidence that they're going to do the right thing for them.
Yeah, yeah. Jodi, I'm, you guys are running firms that have been around for a very long time. You've got a lot of information within the firm
Yeah.
about your client, about some of the other clients, and there's a lot of kind of background information that you're storing, I guess, which can have an impact in terms of, when is the right time for you to have a conversation with the client? At what frequency are you interacting with your long-term clients and stuff like that? Um, how is that changing? I guess it's still very much evolving today, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think you and James are right. The fact that, everyone can now do this, I think it's more touch points with the client. It's more kind of showing that you can provide that market insight, the network that you bring, the intelligence you bring on compensation changes on, you know, when there are big shifts in the market that might not be known, publicly. But also you're competing, excuse me, with the talent teams inside because they can also get really smart really quick. So I think that's a big piece where you want to stay on par and ahead of that with your client.
Mm.
Uh, James, what about the fact that you've got, I don't know, dozens or hundreds of clients that you've worked with over the last 25 years. Um, how do you know who to catch up with and when? I mean, are you leveraging the information that you've got about past contacts in order to help you try and sort of structure your business development timing?
No, we I think probably been fairly slow to that, and it's not that we have we don't see the value in it, but I still think that there's an awful lot of tools being built for just this sort of thing, and a lot of them are quite expensive, and I just didn't quite see they felt more to me like they were sort of prospecting tools than really sort of relationship management tools, and uh, that's we do much of our work with existing clients, and the clients, the new clients that come to us often come through the sort of network in fairly sort of close proximity to us, based upon their knowledge of some of the work that we might have done for a contact of theirs, etc. So we're not sort of prospecting, and we just haven't seen a tool that feels great for our needs. But I think that what it is doing is we are starting to do is through AI look at analyze some of the trends in the market and see where some of the people that we historically have worked with who might have moved companies and sectors, and going back to them with a now that they're in a sector that looks like it's in growth mode where we've got a bit of experience, then we'll go back and try and get that relationship going again.
Mhm.
But I think relative, it all still feels like we're sort of still very much in the foothills here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Jodi, I mean, I think we are, as James says, kind of still very much in the foothills in terms of the new technology and what the new technology can do with us. But I guess
Yeah.
we're all kind of looking at ways that we can manage relationships more effectively. And I just wonder if you're seeing things out there in terms of how your firm is working that are helping you to manage those ongoing relationships. Because obviously you have hundreds and hundreds of relationships.
Thousands. Yeah.
How are you doing that?
It is, I think it's still very human to human. We don't have agents going out to, speak to any of these folks. Um, I think it's humans are still decisively winning on that, but the tools are actually coming. I just saw a couple this week, and I know Ezekiel is working on some as well.
Yeah,
But it's really about, for us, really tracking our placements, when they've moved, because placements become clients and clients become placements. And, so for us, it's really been a big focus on kind of just keeping that ecosystem. And I agree with James. I mean, we're not out there pitching, it's referrals that come to us and, just that continued long-standing work. I think we looked at a study a few months ago of just kind of 80% of our work is, continued with the same clients over the last 18 years, just
okay,
on different projects. So,
yeah,
but once you fill the C-suite, you're kind of out, right? I mean, there's
yeah.
no more work to do. So it is a continual kind of talking and staying connected to all of them, even as they move into new roles.
I mean, I think you're both using the Ezekiel tool in your firms, aren't you? And
Well, we're just about to move to it. We haven't moved to it yet,
okay,
but
okay,
yeah.
but you use it, Jodi, in Monterosa, don't you?
Yeah, we've used it for many years, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And because that is a tool that is adapted and that they're regularly bringing out new features, particularly in response to issues that are brought up by people like yourself who are long established users. And
Yeah.
has that tool helped you to manage data internally and use that more effectively?
It has. I was just talking to Joseph the other day about it, though. They are just getting some new tools that help us to manage some of the unstructured data, the notes that we
Yeah.
take, the things that come up in conversation. But of course, you have to be very specific in which tools you can use because you don't want that to be publicly available. So we're working on that with them right now. But it is an important data capture, and how you use that data capture and then the trends you see from that are we need better tools for that for sure.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think one of the things that historically um, Ezekiel has done is to have that constant dialogue with all of their clients, which I think is
Yeah.
helping them to identify where there's a need to do things. James, what did you look for in terms of your decision to move to Ezekiel, and how are you hoping that tool might help you in terms of business development?
Well, um, so I think our journey was probably quite similar to a lot of companies, and that we've got to a size where we're now a sort of mid-sized firm. So I think, as I mentioned, sort of getting on for 70 people, and we our database usage amongst the partners has been sort of fairly patchy. Some absolute super users, some really hardly used it at all, frankly. And what has started to become abundantly clear was that if you're going to use AI in any other substantial way, that's not just sort of very superficial, just use an AI tool to do some research or use an AI tool to sort of analyze a market or do some, yeah, it's all sort of edge case scenarios. If you want to really, really get the value out of AI, you have to have AI running on your own data set. And our data set was feeling very, very incomplete. We had not partners, as I say, weren't using it. So we decided to go on a journey to try and find a new tool, and specifically it had to be something that we were confident we could get 100% compliance with amongst the partners. So that's how we're going in. It's table stakes now that everybody records everything onto the system, and of course we need to make it as easy for them to do that as we can. And people will hopefully, once they start doing that, will start to see the value from it. It'll become a tool that they use rather than just something they've got to fill in, and something that makes them more efficient rather than takes time away. And so, because then I think once you start to collect that data fairly quickly, you can run some fairly exciting things with AI that help you to understand historically where your client contacts have been, in future where they might have been, understand some of the networks of relationships that exist that you can start to exploit to find your way to new business. And so that's very much the plan that we're working to at the moment.
I mean, it's always been my experience since I started in the search industry many years ago that actually there was reluctance on behalf of the older partners to get stuck in and start using the technology. And I remember one of the things about Ezekiel when it first came out is that it had to be so simple that every single person in the building would use it. And I don't know what your experience has been, Jodi, but that makes a huge difference. If you're getting data from everybody and everybody's using the system all the time, then it must make it a much more powerful tool, surely.
Oh, it's a much more powerful tool. Yeah. I mean, I was at Heidrick and Struggles for many years prior to founding Monterosa. And, it was similar where, not everyone used the database. You'd have to kind of fill in for your partner, where you knew the details. And now you can do it on the go. You can do it on the cloud. You can do it. Yeah, it's much easier and very easy. You can do voice notes into it. It's a pretty simple tool.
And is it all the partners using it? I mean, is it everybody using it, or is it pretty much everybody?
Well, we're two partners, but yes,
Okay.
everybody. We've got 15 people across the globe and everybody uses it
Okay.
very, very regularly. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, that makes a big difference, I think, for a firm like yours, James, because you're spread across multiple locations, aren't you?
Yes.
And the partners are constantly out of the office, I'm sure. They're either working from home or they're traveling to client sites or whatever it may be, traveling to meet potential candidates.
Yeah.
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 Predominantly remote. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think the thing about AI is we know that the technology is evolving, but if everybody's not using it, there's no way you're going to really leverage the potential, are you? I mean, I don't know what you think, James, but
Well, yeah, but I suppose there are two separate things. There's harvesting the data. So the old database has got to be good enough that people engage with it, and so you're harvesting the vast amount of data that your company is creating.
yeah,
An awful lot of interviews historically would be done on pieces of paper and scribbled notes that might then get passed to an EA who would produce a Word document, which then would go to a client. A lot of the time wasn't even saved on the database. We're now trying to find those and put them on the database, actually, sort of constantly sort of trying to build the data set. So I think there's two things. There is making sure you've got a system that supports the constant harvesting of data. And then and only then, when you've got that, can you run AI in any meaningful way? That's the thing, and that's when the really exciting applications of AI might be found, and I hope we find them.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd add a third piece in there, though, that you have to be GDPR compliant. You have to really manage how that data gets used, and it's getting back to winning the mandate, of course. That is your secret sauce, right? So I
Mm.
agree wholeheartedly.
yeah. Jerry, I have a question for you because obviously there is an expectation that AI will change a lot of things in terms of how industries work. and that includes the executive search industry. And we don't yet know how the technology is going to develop, but from where you sit today, what do you see being the potential impact on business development for firms such as yours, and how you leverage the AI potential?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we're even seeing it a little bit today, but I think even more so in a year or two. I mean, things are moving monthly, right? So I would say probably the biggest shift will be there will be less mandates to have.
Okay.
And that's probably because the TA teams or the connections people can make on LinkedIn and the other tools, they can do those without an extra cost of executive search. And so you really have to stay connected to your clients. You really have to stay connected to the market. You have to own that intelligence. And you have to, definitely think through those relationships and make sure that you've got that conviction, on solving that search quicker than anyone else.
Yeah. But it comes down to the fact, James, doesn't it, that you've still got to be in the right place at the right time. You've got to be talking to your historical client at that
Mm.
moment when they're thinking of doing something, or they have a need to do something. And AI is going to help us in terms of collecting intelligence externally, but also leveraging the internal intelligence that we hold within our historical data set.
Mm.
I just wonder how do you see the future application of AI in your firm, and how do you see it changing the way that you approach business development?
So I think that there will be. I think when you sit down as a headhunter and are thinking about how to develop business, and you've been doing this for as long as we all have, then very often you can come up with a bunch of activities that you can do that if you drive them through, you can be fairly confident will yield some opportunities and hopefully some new business. And very often those are quite research intensive. So, kind of find the people that we know in this sector. Let's put together an email and get out to them. I think if you're harnessing AI in the right way, you'll just be able to do that much quicker in a much more sophisticated, much more comprehensive and accurate way. So, if you could just sort of, on the way into work, perhaps sort of using AI to build a list of candidates you might have placed who now find themselves in the data center industry, and send out an email to them outlining some of the work that you've done and asking to reconnect. And I think those sort of things are just when you get those things happening and they become part of your sort of habitual activity, that's when I think we'll start to see that happening more and more. And on the other side is, I think when you're pitching, when you're in talking with clients about the role, it's now we've noticed. So I'd be interested if Jodi sort of feels the same. There is a real sort of expectation that the candidates that you're talking about. Everybody expects you to come to the
Yeah.
briefing, talk ready and equipped to talk about some candidates. And whereas before it used to be enough to just sort of say, well, here's sort of 6 or 8 people who we think kind of look like they might be interesting. The expectation is now, well, tell me about them. Why do you think they would be interested? Do you think they get on with the CEO? Have they had an exit? What would their view be on sort of options versus, cash compensation? So the expectation of the the quality of the conversation has just gone, feels like higher even in the last sort of, few quarters.
And
Yeah.
Jodi, you talked about the talent acquisition teams internally and LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is over 1 billion profiles now.
Mhm.
Mm.
And sure, I can kind of look at 1 billion profiles and I can come up with the 500 most likely. But knowing a bit about you and a bit about you, James, Jodi, you've got a network of relationships, you personally, and
Yeah.
there's hundreds and hundreds of those relationships. And what I remember from doing search 20, 30 years ago is that how we managed those relationships was quite haphazard.
Yeah, absolutely.
It,
Yeah, it was
and
catch as catch can.
there wasn't enough there wasn't enough relationship activity so that I could maintain the relationship with effectively hundreds of people. I
Hmm.
mean, it's not 1,000, but it's maybe 300, 400 people that you need to kind of really maintain relationships with, and with the right technology tools, and hopefully Ezekiel is going to provide you with some of those. You can maintain those relationships, or can't you? I don't know. What's your perception?
You can't, yeah, you absolutely can. And I think Ezekiel does provide those tools. I mean, we're bespoke, right? So, every transaction is quite individual. I wouldn't want to send a group email out in any way. But I know that Ezekiel does provide those tools. I guess the other, take it off of LinkedIn, take it off of the tools, and really think through, what does your client really want to hear? They want to hear your content. So do you do Substack? Do you do, like actual posting on LinkedIn? Is there X, is there like a separate platform where you stand out to be that content driver? Because we're no longer service providers. We're now moving into that kind of strategic advisory. To James' point, I mean, AI enables us to really free time from execution. So, we need to move upstream and think of org design conversations, talent strategy, succession planning. The firms that win aren't necessarily the fastest at executive search, although quick is always key.
Mm.
But we're definitely the ones shaping talent decisions, and that's
I mean,
important.
James, I remember going back to
Mm.
1991, I think it was, when Heidrick and Struggles did the search for the IBM CEO. And before IBM awarded the search, Heidrick had to go to the board of IBM and say who the shortlist was going to be based on their personal
Mm.
knowledge of the potential candidates. What's their
Mm.
motivation to move? What's the motivation to move at this time? What's going to be their attitude to this, or what's going to be their approach to that? So those personal relationships that you talked about earlier are critical, aren't they?
Mm.
And you've got to maintain that network of relationships over an extended period of time.
Yeah, and I'm sure if the search was happening for that same role, exactly the same thing would happen again. There'd be an expectation that you know them, you can get them on the phone, and you can be fairly sure that you might be able to get them into that boardroom. But yeah, so I don't think that has changed. But I I think it's fundamentally changing the market, that most of, the more volume search market. So that, C level and board roles in companies in that sort of 50 to sort of 400 million revenue range. Those are not easy roles to fill. I mean, I think we've been sort of, there have been so many sort of announcements of the death of the executive search industry. One of them being when LinkedIn really sort of started to take off. Say, all right,
Yeah,
well, that's it.
yeah,
The
yeah,
black
yeah.
books, the black book's not worth anything anymore. And lo and behold, what? Yeah, but it wasn't, because everybody could find the people, everybody you could find out who the people were. But because everybody could find out who the people were, everybody started contacting the people, and so the people became less inclined to answer every LinkedIn approach that they got, to the point now
Yeah.
where the really good candidates don't really look at LinkedIn at all in our experience. So you got to find another way to get a hold of them. So, and I think this is just, this is another massive wave of information that is sort of breaking over this market. But I'm very sure that we'll in a year's time we'll be talking about it in a similar way, that it's been great, it's been useful, but executive search is still alive and well, and will be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Jodi, I mean, I do think that we've read the obituary for executive search many times, haven't we? And
Yeah.
but it's still becoming more and more important. And I think, to your point, um, you guys in the executive search industry, you're strategic advisors, but you're
Yeah.
basing your strategic advice on the live intelligence that you're getting from the people that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got to be plugged into that market and who are the movers and shakers in that market, because you can't start doing that after the search. You need to be doing that before the search, don't you? Because that's what's going to get you the mandate, isn't it?
100%, 100%. And I think the the oftentimes when we go in for some sort of mandate discussion, there's not even an understanding of what that title is, what the job is, they know that the outcome is this, KPI. But often it's really thinking through, you know, the challenges that the teams are facing now, the org design today, how, of course, AI is in that, how you'll assess for it, and, ultimately kind of the perspective, the challenges, and, the better decisions for the clients and how we can help them translate that. So it is much more about advisory. It's not a pitch for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we've got a question here. I'm going to kind of open with you, James, from Debbie. What are your thoughts to the new Microsoft OpenAI jobs platform to compete and potentially replace LinkedIn, and how will that impact the talent acquisition process? I don't know the tool, but I don't know whether you do.
Yeah, I have to confess, I've not come across it at all now, but straight after this I'm going to get asked someone to have to give me a bit of a briefing on it. But I mean, I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because of course Microsoft also owns LinkedIn. And so I'm pretty sure that they will have thought through any potential sort of conflicts there really quite carefully, and I'm sure they're sort of focused on leveraging AI and Copilot to make LinkedIn even more profitable than it is for them than it is today. So yeah, but I wish I could answer that properly. I apologize that I can't.
Jodi, have you come across this tool, Microsoft
No,
OpenAI?
I've only heard about it, but I have not used it. No.
Yeah.
I'll be very interested myself. Yeah, it's a good question.
One of the question I get asked quite a lot, in fact, I was asked yesterday, is, what job title should I use on LinkedIn
Mhm.
in order to get more traction? And I think one of the things that I've observed is that, because everybody is using AI to try and sharpen their LinkedIn profile or make their LinkedIn profile, and the result is perhaps inevitably that all the profiles start to look a bit more the same.
Yeah.
And actually it's down to then, what your achievements have been, because I think doing the sort of level of search that you guys are involved with at Monterosa and at Calibre One, it's not down to the job title. It's actually, what are the specific achievement, what's the background of that person, and how have their achievements in the past, how are those relevant to the challenges that the company is facing today? So I wonder, does that because the LinkedIn profile, I don't know, how important is that, and how important is it to really understand the specific achievements of the individuals that you're talking to?
I can take that one to
Sure.
begin with. I mean, it's a LinkedIn profile is incredibly important and it has to have the right, pieces there. I mean, percentage growth that they've managed, whether it's a P&L, there are certain things. But I agree with you. My eyes just gloss over when it's X, Y is an established leader and you're like, ugh, you know, you try to give me this stuff. But this is where an established executive search person or a really good executive search person can like weed through the talk and the gibberish versus what you know about the company during the time they were there, the role that they were in. And that is when you're like, that's who I want to talk to. I want to talk to them because they, were there when it went public, when it, was trying to be taken over by a, activist and they won kind of
Mm,
thing. So that's really key,
mm.
to knowing the intelligence.
James, you mentioned earlier about interviews that were conducted and notes written on paper and
Mm.
never transferred into the system, and trying to capture that data, some of that data retrospectively. But if you've got that data going in straight away, because the tool, whether it's Ezekiel or something else, if the tool makes it really, really easy for everybody to enter that data, then you're capturing some of that intelligence internally. So it's not just the LinkedIn profile you're looking at, but you're able to leverage your internal data sources as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, do you have an expectation that that's going to be, more powerful for firms like Calibre One, where you've been in the market for 25 years?
Yes, except that I think we're not going to invest an enormous amount of money in just trying to, put all of the data that we've got historically, that we've been allowed to keep through GDPR, onto the system retrospectively. But we're going to focus all of our time, effort, and resources in just making sure that all new data is captured and goes onto the system. Every single bit, every single interaction in detail. And of course, it's very important to be sort of compliant when one does that. But I think if you're able to make that as automated as you possibly can, then that's the secret. And so we're very, very committed to doing that. And I think, just to go back to the last point that you raised, about there's an interesting one about the LinkedIn profiles. I think everybody is using AI now to do every single piece of writing of stuff that they used to do manually, and used to think about really carefully, and write, and then rewrite, and then rewrite again, and they'd get it all absolutely perfect before they put it up. And I think what we have now is we can produce something really good very, very quickly and easily, using the simplest of prompts on AI, and it'll be passable. But somebody reading it is going to look at it and go, "Oh, that's AI." And I think we're becoming increasingly, aware of what looks like AI. And you've got those long dashes in AI generated content that quite a lot of people have on various sort of content that they'll create. And I think these days it's starting to become abundantly clear that there's a new requirement for the really effective engineering of your prompts when you're using AI. So how do you use AI to get what you really need from it, whilst making it also sound, very, very human? And that is something that is quite difficult to do.
Yeah.
That's a really important point. In fact, my son, who's studying electrical engineering, said they're no longer called software engineers, they're now prompt engineers.
Oh, really?
That was really an interesting distinction. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I notice, when I'm working with clients and they're trying to create a LinkedIn profile, that they create something pretty good. I would say it's kind of 90% there. They then go and put it through the AI laundromat, and it comes out looking like everybody else's bloody LinkedIn profile. So there is kind of and like you, I have this sort of natural aversion to something that looks like it's kind of mass-produced AI stuff, and I want to find the sort of more human side of it.
Yeah, but also, the prompts for that, it's very easy to upload your CV and then say to ChatGPT, write me a really good LinkedIn profile. And it will write you a pretty good LinkedIn profile. But if you were then to say, and bring out some of the statistics in my CV and relate them to the growth rate that the company that I was working with itself went through, and so how I did compared to my peers, and make it read, structure it in such a way that it's going to be brief enough but compelling, really compelling to a headhunter that might be looking at this, then that obviously is going to come up with quite a different, probably much better result.
Yeah. Jodi, coming back to what we were talking about in terms of the business development and winning the mandate in this kind of new era, how is the technology, tools like Ezekiel, how is that going to help you in terms of going forward, and how your chances of being more successful in business development?
Well, I'm actively thinking of that because, it's an important piece. And I think from going back to the point of, you don't walk in typically having the exact role that the clients know that, they need someone. So I think it's role to capability. So Ezekiel helps us pull out those capabilities as opposed to, just a CFO, right? So maybe it's roles are becoming less standardized, right? There's thinking through kind of what good looks like for a client, and that will be really important because roles are changing. I mean, you think through defining something like a chief AI officer. How do you assess that? Because that's the new function, but how do you assess success in that, right? AI product leadership, AI everything, right? We've had clients say AI forward often, and it's how do you assess that? So I think, you know, reaching back to profiles where you can find on Ezekiel those who've used kind of LLMs in the past, machine learning in the past, like it's a really, really important thing to find that hybrid operator.
James, I remember in the past, winning searches in a situation where, as we were in discussion with the CEO, with the client, I was already aware of who the right person was to fill that job, and therefore the our mandate over the next few weeks of the search was to try and find other options, other candidates who were as good as that benchmark profile. But that was just using my brain. That was just my memory. When it's not so dependent on your personal memory, but you've got tools. I mean, how do you think that or how do you hope, I should say, that technology tools like Ezekiel are going to help you be more successful in business development?
So I think the biggest thing is just having it sounds sort of really basic, but just having it collect all of the data. And then I think the functionality that sits on top of that is all great, finding candidates, managing campaigns and doing sort of outreach and having it recorded and is great. But I think the most valuable thing is actually collecting that data. And then there are going to be other platforms that you can use to start to leverage that data once you're collecting it constantly. So, in a business development context, if you're pitching, to three or four people, as is very often the case, there's often private equity investor, a board member, a chairman, and the CEO, say, and then you put those people into the system. And you've done a pretty good pitch, you're up against some really good competition though. And so you really want to do everything that you can to try and bring it your way. Then you can inquire, as long as you've got the data, you can then sort of say to the platform, so who else in the broader network do we know who is fairly close to those decision makers? And then, if there's somebody that you know really well, you can put in a quick call to them and say, look, would you mind me using you as a reference?
Yeah.
And so I think just understanding, not just the people that but the people that they know that you may also know. And so understanding those, yeah, just the better understanding of your own extended network, I think is probably one of the biggest things.
So whatever the context, it's about being able to collect the data in the first place, because you can't
Mhm.
leverage the data if you haven't collected it.
Exactly. And
Um,
if you can't run AI on bad data, it's
yeah,
not very intelligent.
but you do need the right tools that will allow you to leverage that internal resource that you have.
Yeah.
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 Is there
I'd add
anything
a
else?
couple of things to that. Just in thinking through, I agree. I mean, it's, kind of this is the perfect benchmark, then you go out from there. But Ezekiel actually has, just like in LinkedIn, you can say, look at profiles like this, right?
Okay.
And it can pull up. But I'd go one step further because we can now without a lot of trouble and, look at companies that have had this same arc, and who was that executive, right, at the time.
mm, mm,
And chances are you'll know them, or chances are you'll be 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from them. But I think if we go one more step, that is what wins the mandate. It's just that extra intelligence that, the client doesn't have time to do, and it's our perspective. And, I think
mm.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that probably proves the value of an executive search firm rather than just handing it over to the internal talent acquisition team.
Yeah, because they're not really our competition,
I,
right? But when it comes to thinking through and our networks, but I think we're translators of kind of the business ambition to the market and the talent reality, right? I mean, that's a big piece. And I don't think talent acquisition is typically that.
I want to touch on one last topic before I open it up to the Q&A. So I just want to say to everybody on the call, if you have some questions or you have some thoughts or things that you want to challenge us with, please use the chat function and we'll try and respond to those. I want to ask both of you, what do you see as the impact of technology in changing the executive search industry in the foreseeable future? Can I start with you, James? What do you see the impact of technology can be or is likely to be?
Well, I think it's going to be huge. I mean, it's a bit difficult to look beyond AI, isn't it, really? Because again, we are just sort of so in the foothills, and it's just clear that it is going to be completely transformative and in ways that we are only barely beginning to understand. So, but what I'm sort of equally sure of is that I don't think that there will ever be a point where headhunters, good headhunters, are going to be taken out of the equation because when people want to hire people, you need a person as a go-between, to manage that relationship and make things happen. And that's something, of course, people are going to be, hiring bots and stuff. I'm sure, AI will do a great job of that. But I think, when it comes to people, it's, I don't think there is going to be as many roles in the search industry as there perhaps used to be. I do think the search industry, though, was probably going to grow. I think firms will become a lot more efficient in how they operate, and I do think that luckily, I think we're the very, very tip of the spear. And one of those, I think all of these sort of, people who are sort of looking into these futurologists are all sort of saying, I think that this is one of those sort of professions, one of those jobs that is probably, fairly safe in this massive, massive revolution that we're overseeing now.
Jodi, what are your thoughts in terms of the future of our industry?
Well, I agree. I mean, we're not going anywhere. But if I were just starting out in this industry, I'd think differently. I think that's where it's a little different because what's changing is AI is compressing kind of the research time, the long list generation, the things that took us, the assessments. I mean, that we all spent hours and hours, mulling over late at night, candidate identification. So I think speed becomes expected and it's not differentiating. So if I were starting out, I'd really think through those networks, make sure I get that specialty, make sure I get into kind of really smart on what the sectors are I want to, really be a specialist in so that you can bring that assessment and calibration and, kind of true talent decisions to your client and have that conviction because I think really it's not about finding the candidates, it's about, helping the client decide between the right ones and why.
I
But
mean, I
I
think
think, yeah.
there's a couple of things. I mean, I want to throw out, Jodi, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think one is I think the executive search industry will continue to grow. I agree with you on that, James. Two, I think that the firms that are doing really, really well will start to pull away from the firms
Hmm.
that are doing okay.
Hmm.
In other words, if you're new to the industry, you should be joining one of the firms that's going to be a winner. Yeah. And we look back at the technology industry and we know, there are lots of companies that are no longer around. And they're no longer around because they weren't swimming fast enough and they got eaten. And I think that same is going to happen in the search industry. And my third prediction is that I think that the execution is going to become condensed. We
Yeah.
used to joke in Hydric, I'm sure you remember this, Jodi. We used to talk about 1 day search, doing
Yeah.
a search in 24 hours, which, technically is possible now if you're using the tools effectively. But
Yeah.
if I look back 6 months ago, what we were doing with AI and compare it to where we are now,
Yeah.
it's a huge change.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen in the next 6 months? I mean, I don't know, but the next 6 years, 7 years, it could be a huge change, couldn't it?
Yeah. And clients see that. Clients see that as well, right? So they're expecting more from us, more thinking from us,
Yeah.
less AI because everyone can do that. So we're thinking about succession planning, that team design, where AI forward fits in, what the capability building is, right?
Yeah. So the success in business development is going to depend on a lot more of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Before we close out, I mean, please, if you have any more questions, let us know. I'm just going to try and respond to some of these here. Um, there's a question here I'm going to throw at you, James. How is your
Hmm.
organization using technology to ensure business development outreach remains compliant with commercial communication regulations, with stuff like GDPR, I guess, or whatever other regulations there are?
Well, we have uh, somebody internally who is constantly looking at our data, constantly cleansing our data to make sure that we are GDPR compliant. And so I'm assuming that therefore we are, and obviously, our communications with prospects, if you like, are therefore compliant as a result. We don't really do much in the way of mass mail outs, or in fact we don't do them at all. So it's all, I think Jodi sort of mentioned, it's all quite bespoke. If we sent it, we'd never sort of send an email that was sort of standardized to 20 to well, all of our emails would be one to one.
Mhm.
But that's another use of AI is I'm sure that actually it doesn't need to be, it just needs to feel like it is, and so that I guess is a fairly sort of obvious use case.
Yeah.
No
Uh,
long dashes.
Yeah. That's just
we don't, we're not in that game really, are we? Of sort of filling out those mass communications. It's more about
Mm.
managing the relationships. But I get the feeling that there's some interesting technology out there, and you both see that these are some potentially really valuable tools, and hopefully that your existing technology platform will enable you to leverage those tools effectively, to make sure that you're winning more of those mandates.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
I guess that the easy mandates, as you were saying earlier, Jodi, those easy mandates are going to go because the talent acquisition team is going to do those.
Yeah. I mean, I know I would if I were the client. I wouldn't spend money on that. Yeah. We always
Yeah.
get the hard ones, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
get the hard ones on purpose.
They
Mm.
wouldn't pay us unless it was hard.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
That was kind of always my view. But cool. Well, listen, are there any more questions that people want to ask? James, any more thoughts you want to add in terms of the discussion that we've had, and particularly around the focus on business development in the future?
Um, no, I don't think I have anything more to add. Well, but just perhaps a sort of summary statement from it is it feels to me like there's an awful lot of talk about AI applications and things that you can do with AI, and I don't see that there's a massive future for a lot of these applications, in all honesty, because I think that they're all quite simple. They're all dependent upon the data. And so if you don't have the data, you might as well just forget it. You're never going to. So the value, and if you're looking to create value, if you're looking to differentiate in a pitch situation and build value in the firm, it's all about the data that you're able to harvest. and then what you're able to do with it. And I think, these sort of executive search specific applications, I think, everybody's going to be doing everything on Claude. Everything is going to be powered by Claude, and other sort of AIs like it. So yeah, that. But I think unless you're collecting the data, there's no point.
I've got three questions here, which I'm going to try and quickly answer, get on to. One is from Tom. Have you found the ongoing AI developments have had any impact on your commercial terms when pitching for work? If so, have you found there are particular client groups that are more price elastic in this current environment, i.e., any difference between conversations you're having with growth cap versus large cap? Jodi, any thoughts on that?
Hmm. Well, I have seen a lot of our clients, and I think James alluded to this as well, as hiring chief AI officers, AI product, tech, et cetera. And because of that, unfortunately for the clients, the compensation for that group is going up, right? So pricing is definitely getting in that direction. But no, for the most part, I do see that we are keeping our pricing pretty high, depending on kind of and we always work with the clients that make the most sense. But large cap for sure, PE backed, I think PE backed, VC backed, that they're getting compressed. I do think pricing is.
James, there's a quick question here from Kim about contingent searches. I know that neither of your firms do contingent searches, but what do you think of the future of contingent searches? I would think that's going to be a rapidly shrinking market, isn't it, James?
Yeah, but I would say that because we don't do contingent search either. When I say that, if you're able to do it effectively and make it work, of course, there's always going to be clients who think, well, we'll try contingent search first. But and maybe actually with AI, you can run a contingent search in a super economical way, such that if you don't actually end up placing it, you've not expended a huge amount of money in pursuing that opportunity. So
Sure.
yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that is.
Yeah, I think it makes it more efficient, but I think that it does not replace knowing the network for sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably the bottom line, isn't it? There's another question here. I'm not sure if any of us can answer this one, which is how do we encourage our relationship conversations to live in Ezekiel? I don't really understand the question very well, but is that something?
Well,
Because
I think maybe I do, because that's sort of something that we sort of been thinking about. Just how do we sort of make sure that everything goes on, everything is recorded, everything.
Yeah.
So how do you incentivize people to do that? Well, I think there's two things. Number one, you make Ezekiel the source, or sorry, your database, it ends up being Ezekiel, the source for everything.
Yeah.
So people use it to track their pipeline. It's the only place you're tracking pipeline. So people naturally go to it to move things along, and they're using it all day, every single day. So it becomes much more sort of instinctive that they use
Yeah.
it. And the other thing is, of course, that you use every tool that you possibly can to get it to integrate with Ezekiel, such that actually it just happens automatically.
Okay.
And the final thing is that you make sure there's 100% compliance, by meaning that people can't close off searches, and if they can't close off a search, the final invoice can't go out, and if the final invoice doesn't go out, all these other lovely things don't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's how we're thinking of it, and I think everybody understands. I think the rules of the game have changed. This is, if you want AI, you want to use AI, you've got to have the data, and everybody kind of understands that, even if they don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. The last one here, Jodi, but from Robert. It was mentioned that AI is broadly leveling the playing field, and there potentially being fewer mandates as AI continues to develop, but the industry is still expanding. In an industry that could be considered to have a lower barrier to entry, what are your perspectives on how firms can differentiate in a meaningful way when pursuing previously untapped clients? I mean, I think
Yeah.
the barriers to entry to the industry are low.
Yeah.
or at least they appear to be
Absolutely.
low, but I think the barriers to entry in doing the kind of work that you and James are doing are probably quite considerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't just walk in the door as a new headhunter and, pick up a Fortune 500 or a PE backed. But I think we're increasingly working with clients that not just on who to hire, but on how to build the organization around that hire and around AI in the first place. So for us, it's less about stepping into a search and more about helping shape the context in which the search exists.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think that's the real differentiation. I think that's tough to have someone just walk in the door and not know that. I think you have to be very, very astute on org design and talent in general and the trends in the industry.
Yeah. You're much more advisory, James, as well. I think in this, at the level that you and Jodi are working at, you're much more adding value over and above the narrow confines of the search mandate. In other words,
Yeah,
it's much more value added that you're bringing.
yeah. I mean, I certainly like to think that's the case. Whether the clients sort of agree or not, I don't know. But I do think that what's happened is that, as I was saying before, there's been a real sort of there's a democratization of data, and
Yeah.
so everybody's got access to all of this stuff now. And so that's great. It levels the playing field. It opens things up for competition. So what, as one of the, as an established firm, you need to be making sure that you do everything that you can to just try and stay that just little step ahead. And one of the things that a startup firm can't have is just the data that a firm that's established does. And there's plenty of firms that are established that don't do anything with the data. And
But
some
the reality, James, as we all know here on this call, we all know that, you know, there are, as you said earlier, there's a lot of executives out there who don't use LinkedIn because they just don't want to be bombarded with thousands and thousands of messages.
yeah,
And therefore, if you have a personal relationship with the potential candidate that you're trying to speak to, they know you, they recognize your voice, they recognize your phone number when you make the call because you've called them before. I mean, it's those personal relationships again, isn't it? Isn't it,
Yeah.
Jodi?
Yeah. Even better if you've met them in person,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Let's just that human connection is what is going to keep us on top for sure.
I think so.
yeah.
So even in this era of AI and technology, it's the human connection that's going to keep us on top. And hopefully the tools will help us to manage those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you both, Jodi and James. It's been a fantastic, really interesting discussion. I've learned a lot, and thank you everybody who has joined us on the call. Thank you to Huntscaler Media for setting this up, and I'm sure there will be other interesting webinars from Huntscaler Media. But very grateful for everybody who's joined us on the call today. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.